Welcome to the Pro-Life Team Podcast. I'm Mary McClusky, and I'm with Jacob Barr, and today we are talking about Project Rachel Ministry, the diocesan-based abortion healing ministry of the Catholic Church in the United States. We're going to talk about how Project Rachel Ministry got its name from the Old Testament book of Jeremiah and Rachel weeping for her children, and how the Lord dried her tears. We also talk about how the ministry is based in prayer and liturgy, and how the abortion healing journey is really all about how all of us can share the message of forgiveness, hope, and healing.
These podcasts are not scripted. The ideas presented may not be the official position of the speakers, the related organizations, or the sponsors. These podcasts are free-form dialogues that may include brainstorming and trying on ideas to see how they fit. Please walk with us as we share stories and ideas.
So Mary, I'm excited to have you on the Pro-Life Team podcast. Would you introduce yourself as if you were talking to a small group of executive directors of pregnancy clinics?
Sure. Well, Jacob, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on the Pro-Life Team podcast. So my name is Mary McClusky, and I am the Assistant Director of Project Rachel Ministry Development at the USCCB Pro-Life Secretariat. And taking a note from my husband, who always makes a joke wherever he goes, they say the longer your title is in Washington, the less you actually do. So so my role is to help Catholic dioceses throughout the country to primarily in the area of pastoral care. So that's two components here at the USCCB in the Pro-Life Secretariat, and that's pregnancy assistance, but mostly my job involves helping dioceses to develop Project Rachel Ministry. And that is the diocesan-based abortion healing ministry of the Catholic Church in the United States. So it's, basically my role is to meet the needs of the bishops and the dioceses, and however they are best seeking to serve the people that are suffering from participation in abortion.
Okay.
So, that's everything from developing pamphlets to conferences to resources, being a kind of cheerleader coach behind the scenes, having lots of discussions and pointing resources out to them, a lot of different things, basically.
And what does USCCB stand for?
Yeah, thank you. We're always kind of explaining acronyms here in this city. United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. And, I work here, and sometimes I'm still trying to, figure out exactly what it is, because it's a little bit complicated if you're not familiar with kind of the structure, the hierarchy of the Catholic Church and how it works. But basically, it's an Episcopal conference. And what that means is all the bishops throughout the country gather together as a body called the USCCB, U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. And they form committees. And those committees each have a chairman. And the chairman directs that committee to do its work on behalf of all the bishops of the country around specific issues. And I am one of 10 staff members who serve the Committee on Pro-Life activities. So my work here in the Pro-Life Secretariat, I'm one of a team of people who we have a variety of different areas of pro-life work that we're tasked with, that we're responsible for. And those areas are prayer and liturgy. That, of course, is the very foundation of everything we do. And policy and advocacy, education and outreach. You may have heard of the Respect Life program, which is all throughout the country. There's a new topic and kind of themes every year. And then pastoral care, which is primarily my area. But a lot of our work dovetails, a lot of work in Project Rachel Ministry, of course, is going to be involving prayer and liturgy, of course, because it's we're the church. So of course that's going to be a part of our work in the very foundation. But education and outreach, a lot of the ministry involves teaching people who, people in parishes and at the diocesan level about the effects of abortion on people and what kind of some of the needs are, and outreach as well, spreading the word that, there are many people who think that, who feel as if they have committed this unforgivable sin and they're not worthy of God's mercy. And we're here to say, no, God loves you. God loves you no matter what you have done. And his mercy is far greater than any mistakes that you've made in your past.
Going back to the prayer part of the ministry, what does that look like? Are you providing like written prayers for people to use, or is it like an exercise? Or are you putting together people to pray in certain ways? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, so some dioceses, when they begin the ministry or as part of their outreach efforts, will do something called a mass of healing or a mass of awareness. And so, for those who are not maybe familiar with the Catholic faith, the Mass, the celebration of the Eucharist, is one of it is the primary way in which the Church really offers the sacrifice of the Mass for. It's the primary way that we pray, and so those kinds of offering that sacrifice and celebrating the Mass is one way to of course pray, asking the Lord for his guidance, his blessings, his help, praising, worshiping him, for all the wonderful, beautiful gifts he gives us, including his love and his mercy. But it's also a way of spreading awareness, right? As we publicize the Mass, invite people to come, we're making people aware of what exactly the Mass is about, and this prayer intention that we're specifically coming together to offer up to the Lord. And but in addition, yes, what you asked about specifically was, does the ministry offer particular prayers? Absolutely. I mean, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of many prayers that are either written or guiding people to pray just from their own heart, for healing, for God's forgiveness, healing, for hope, for peace, for entrusting their child to God's mercy and asking for the hope of being united again with their child in heaven, in the fullness of life after they pass on. But of course, I also want to mention, of course, that in the Catholic faith, we have the sacrament of confession, which is, of course, one of the beautiful ways that the Lord in our faith expresses, allows us to go and share with a priest and receive absolution and the graces of that sacrament.
So the prayers that you're referring to, are they mostly for people who have a post-abortion? There's essentially people that who have experienced the pain of abortion, or is this also for people that are on the sidewalk who might be trying to reach out to women, as they're going into an abortion clinic or in that parking lot?
That could be one aspect of it. I mean, primarily our office is not particularly. We don't develop specific tools or prayers for people who are doing sidewalk advocacy. We might, there are other groups out there that do that we can point dioceses to. Sidewalk Advocates for Life, 40 Days for Life, of course, many dioceses are involved with those groups. So it's not in we're not tasked with the responsibility of necessarily writing prayers for that. But certainly, all the prayers and the liturgy aspects, I mean, that involves so much. There's, innumerable ways of praying that are available and out there. It's a matter of, talking to a priest or talking to your bishop about ways to do that. Holy hours, retreats. I mean, just so many different ways to pray. both people themselves who have participated in abortion, but also for those who have not, to pray for the ministry itself. Many dioceses will have prayer groups that are specifically invited to pray for the ministry, to pray for the team that does minister directly to people um, who are, you know, going on that healing journey. And so, everyone is really invited and called to offer up those prayers for healing. And really, as a nation, if you think about it, we're also not in a very particular individual one-on-one way, but each of us, even if we have not directly participated in abortion ourselves, just our culture is so broken. We're so in need of just this mindset, right? Of having that culture of life, of welcoming people, no matter what, no matter how they're conceived. And even beyond that, again, I want to stress for our office, pro-life is not just at the beginning of life, it's at the end of life too. So, we have resources on euthanasia and assisted suicide as well, and caring for people in their, as they are, the disabled, the sick, the dying, those who are at risk of being at risk of assisted suicide or euthanasia.
So with all these prayers, can you think like what comes to mind when it comes to like seeing how God has worked as a result of these prayers, or how God may have answered certain prayers? Like, can you think of any stories where you can say that, here's God's fingerprints and how he responded, or in some way has, responded to some of these prayers?
Yeah, so I can think of, first of all, I think that the name Project Rachel Ministry, so the name of the ministry itself is taken from Jeremiah, the book of Jeremiah, the Old Testament, where Rachel weeps for her children because they are no more. And the Lord comes to Rachel and dries her tears. And that's kind of the, what I have seen reflected again and again in doing this work is, I have met many women that I've had the privilege of them having, they share their story with me. And in particular, one woman I'm thinking of, she, for the purposes of confidentiality, we don't really share names or many details about people, but I can share that she worked with us on a particular project, and she, she shared with me her pain, and she really shared, what she had been betrayed by the father of her child, and he had left her shortly after he learned of the existence of their child, and then she had the abortion, and just her tears, exactly like Rachel wept. But now I know her, and the time that I've spent with her, she is a woman of such joy and trust in the Lord that I have really seen how God has transformed her heart. God has touched her, and she has a relationship with her loving Father in a way that is just so beautiful to see. And she trusts the Lord. She loves the Lord. She is absolutely convinced of his forgiveness of her. She has forgiven herself, and she has peace. And that's just the beautiful message, the hope that I have for everybody who has participated in an abortion, that God can touch them and make them whole, and they can go on to live have this beautiful relationship with God and be this source of encouragement and joy for other people.
Wow, what an amazing story of healing, emotional and just deep healing. So, and essentially, it sounds like that might have been connected with the prayer life, or some of these prayers. Whether that was,
oh yeah,
and so maybe she was the one who prayed it, or maybe someone else prayed on her behalf. I'm not. Maybe it was both.
Yeah, well, she is definitely a woman of deep prayer, and she always had been. I mean, and just when she shared with me, all the different ways that God kind of led her through, the wilderness. Those are my words, not her, but just led her to people that in each of their own unique ways, um, you know, touched her heart and encouraged her along the way. It reminds me of when I was actually, I think I must have been 18. I was, it was actually the first woman I had met who had shared with me her story. And what she didn't share a lot of details. We didn't have a lot of time to talk, but at the time I was doing a pro-life walk across the country called Crossroads. And they've been around for, I don't know, 15, 20 years. But anyway, we met and she was asking me, we wore these big t-shirts that said pro-life across them. And she was asking what we were doing in her city. And I told her, and she said, I've had 2 abortions. And I don't believe anyone will ever marry me because how could they after what I've done? And my heart just broke for her. And I was a young, fresh-faced, I didn't really exactly know what I was doing. I had not had experience with this before, but I knew enough to know that I just needed to listen to her. And my gut said, just tell her God loves her, just assure her, and so I did. And so we talked and I gave her my number and she tried to call the next day, and where I was staying, we were never able to connect again, but I still pray for her sometimes. And even though I don't know if she ever got help with a ministry, or I don't ever know the end of her story, it gives me hope enough to know that I was maybe one in a series of people that if she did, that maybe something I said encouraged her to open up to someone else or to go to the Lord at some future point in time, or that others along the way had also been a part of maybe encouraging her. And so I think that's one of the messages I always like to share when I talk about, interviewed or just talk about my work, or not my work, but this work, our work, God's work, right, of sharing this message, is that each of us can be a part of it, right? And it's really the Lord's message, right? His message, and he's the one doing the healing, and we're just the instruments in his hands that he uses. And so it's so important, I think, to always be aware that everywhere we go statistically, that there are so many people that are suffering silently, that we just aren't aware have been involved in an abortion. And it's not just the mother or the father. If you think about, the grandparents of the aborted child, right? So they may have, they don't know what to do. Their 16-year-old daughter is pregnant. Oh my gosh, we've got to, let's get rid of this problem. Well, it's not, you can't, this is your granddaughter, this is a child. And they may later on, maybe in the rush of emotions, right? And they think it's the answer, and deep down they know it's not, but later on they come to regret this decision. And so they're mourning, right? They're mourning the loss. So it's just always important to remember, survivor siblings. There's a woman named Teresa Bonapartis who does some work. She has retreats for survivor siblings. And some of the siblings will say, when they discovered that a sibling of theirs was aborted later on, they share things like, wow, I always kind of felt something was off. I always kind of felt like there was a person in my life who was missing. And now I know it was because one of my siblings was aborted. So it's just amazing the sense of family that, that people can have. So anyway, it's always good to speak compassionately whenever we talk about abortion, and remember that someone who has participated in an abortion or has had one, it could be listening.
So, there's this verse in the Bible, James 5:16, and maybe I can pull it up, but it goes something like, confess your sins one to another so that you may be healed, and the prayers of a righteous person availeth much. And so I don't go to a Catholic church. I go to an evangelical church, but I believe, my understanding is that when confessing sins to a priest, I feel like that verse is being, would probably be the reason probably for doing that, because confessing your sins one to another so that you may be healed, and the prayers of a righteous person availeth much. I feel like that would support the idea of of confessing sin to someone else, to then exposing it as saying it out loud, and then asking for someone's prayers to and just having someone hear it, and then also then asking them to pray. And out of curiosity, do people as a Catholic, do you ever confess to another a person maybe on the same level, more so than always going to the priest above, or is it usually I mean, obviously it sounds like it's usually to a priest, but do you also ever confess to other people as well?
Well, as a one of the sacraments, if you're talking strictly in terms of the sacramental seal of confession, right? It is strictly between you and the priest is in persona Christi, we call it, in the person of Christ, specifically ordained as an ordained minister by the bishop to absolve of the sin. No, you would never go to the confession sacrament of reconciliation to anyone other than the priest. But that said, in Project Rachel Ministry, many dioceses offer support groups and also retreats. So in Project Rachel Ministry, we offer both group healing events and individual one-on-one. And so that's really the emphasis there, is that each individual person, every person's abortion is unique. And so therefore their healing journey is going to be very unique. And so that's really what we stress, is how do we meet the needs of that individual person that comes, that is coming forward and saying, sometimes they know what they're looking for, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're just full of pain and they know they want help, but they just don't know what is offered, and they want to find out more about how they can be helped. So that element of the mutual, the kind of support from somebody who has experienced what you have gone through is available in those group kind of healing events, where particularly in support groups, where guided by a therapist, sometimes by a lay professional or a lay team member of the diocesan ministry team, they're guiding people through sharing with each other, lifting each other up, encouraging each other, sharing about, what is working, sharing scripture passages, sharing, talking about how the Lord is working and touching their hearts and leading them on that healing journey. And so there is that element of kind of, not confessing, if you will, but opening up and being vulnerable with each other. And so, because the isolation and not sharing, going through the world as if you feel alone, it is one of the one of the ways that the abortion trauma and grief manifests itself. And so it's really important to be connected and have support on that journey.
So when someone, is there usually a leader of the Project Rachel group who will then be able to help? How many leaders are there, I guess, in a Project Rachel group, or how does a Project Rachel group operate? Like, what are the key elements that take place when they get together? Is it usually over a weekend retreat? What's it look like for for someone to attend a Project Rachel experience?
Yeah. Well, like I said, it depends really on what the person is looking for, but basically, the diocese is offering that it starts with a confidential phone call to the ministry, and every phone number, sometimes they might, first contact might be an email, but basically an individual looking for help would call this confidential dedicated line. So it's only for abortion healing. And, the person, the leader, sometimes the leader, the coordinator of the ministry is not always the person answering the phone, but it typically is. There's not, a lot of resources to have, dozens of paid people and, working in this ministry, but usually it's the same person, answers the phone, and basically it depends on the person. The individual really kind of leads. Again, are they looking for? Usually, it's one of two things. It's for usually either the spiritual component of healing or the emotional. Some people are not quite ready to kind of, face the Lord, face the spiritual, and so they're there more for the emotional, right? And then the two kind of go together. So in Project Rachel Ministry, what we call it the integrated approach to healing. So somebody might be looking for a therapist who specializes in trauma and has that knowledge and understanding, and would, even be pro-life, because as we know, not all therapists are necessarily going to be pro-life or agree that abortion is something that could traumatize someone. So it's important for the ministry to have evaluated all the therapists they refer people to, so that, they know that that therapist is on board with the entire approach of what's offered. So they can be sometimes referred to a therapist or referred to a priest or a pastoral counselor, someone for spiritual direction, or for a group healing event. It really kind of depends. Some people are not ready for a group event, and so it's not a program. It's not a group per se. It's a ministry. It's what can we do? How can we meet the needs of this individual? It's not, they fit into this box or that box. It's we're going to wrap around this person and give them what they need.
So, what happens when someone reaches out for help and they're a person who may not believe in God, and how are they treated the same, or are they treated differently, and how are they responded to?
It's a great question. Yeah. So Project Rachel Ministry is open and available to everyone, people who are Catholic, non-Catholic, people of any faith or no faith at all. So basically the ministry is not going to, it's going to be what it is. It's going to offer the fullness of truth, right? So be authentically Catholic, but at the same time, Jesus himself did not always, he used different language, he used different approaches with different people. Of course, he was all-knowing, but he was also all-loving. So sometimes that all-loving approach meant that, he didn't always, I'm trying to think of, the woman at the well, right? His experience with the Samaritan woman at the well, right? He did not come right up to her and say, you have, I can't remember how many husbands, 3 husbands, however many husbands it was.
I think it might have
5. Okay.
I forget.
Okay.
What guessing? It was a lot.
It was a lot. It was a lot. It was more than one, right? So he did not. He did not.
Not her current husband, I think, as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So he didn't come right up to her and say, you're living in sin, repent. He approached her gently. He led her and offered her the living water. And that would be exactly the approach of someone who calls with no faith at all. It would be to say, we love you, in so many words, not come right out and say we love you, but basically offering care for somebody and saying, here's what we offer. We're happy to listen to you. We're happy to help you. What can we do that meets your needs with where you're at? And then go from there and just begin to build trust, really, and give that person the care and compassion that they deserve, and simply acknowledging the existence of their child when society doesn't. That's an act of love that I think speaks volumes.
So what is a Project Rachel experience? How does it usually take place? Is it like a weekly meeting? Is it a weekend? Like what's the format usually look like?
Well, it depends on what the type of healing opportunity is going on. So, if it's a one-on-one meeting, if it's confession, it's going to be in the confessional. If it's with the therapist, it's going to be in, secure, confidential place where, it's they have privacy and freedom to talk. But and then of course a retreat, the support groups, those would take place at retreat houses or churches, or sometimes, mm, yeah, I mean, even, I know some people will meet someone out at a coffee shop, but the underlying principle is confidentiality. So, the location of retreats are never advertised. Even the reason that a woman might be meeting with the priest is not, i- um, the list of the priest's names, the list of, it's all of that are involved with the ministry. Everything is kept confidential. So it's, um, you know, so that she's secure that, it's not like everybody knows, oh, that's why I'm meeting with Father, right? Everybody knows I've had an abortion, right? She needs to feel safe to be able to, like, to build trust, right? And to share what she wants to share when she's comfortable with whom, right? And so that's a safety issue too, There may be situations in her life. She might be living in an experience, she might be living in a domestic violence situation, right? Where maybe the man who has coerced her um, into an abortion, right? Could be the man that, the man she's living with. And so the last thing you want to do is she's going away for the weekend and, oh, well, she's going to be at this retreat house. And then he goes there to find her, take her away. She's endangered. Other people are endangered. So we're just very careful about confidentiality and privacy.
And then, who was the person who sort of was it Vicky Thorne who created the Project Rachel, or who was like the founding group who created this, and when was it created?
Yeah, so Vicky Thorne founded Project Rachel in the Archdiocese of Milwaukee in 1984. And she began it as the one-on-one approach. And then I think I'm trying to remember the year that she started NOPAR, National Office of Post-Abortion Reconciliation and Healing. So I think it was 8 or 9 years later, after she had, great initial success in the Archdiocese of Milwaukee. Her model spread to other dioceses. They started doing this. Then she started NOPAR. So, and then in 2010, the trademark for Project Rachel was transferred to the USCCB, and so then we added the group healing aspect of it, and so it really we kind of expanded the approach into offering retreats and support groups as well. So yeah, Vicky then my conversations with her, she really shared that she wanted to broaden the approach a little bit and share what she had learned with more than just Catholic dioceses, and she wanted NOPAR to be an organization that was kind of an umbrella organization. So that enabled her to travel around the country and share her knowledge about abortion healing internationally, all over the world. So that's the work that Vicky did primarily through National Office of Post-Abortion Reconciliation and Healing, otherwise called NOPAR.
And speaking of so if someone's in, let's say there's a pregnancy clinic, whether they're in whichever state in the U.S. or somewhere, if they wanted to connect with Project Rachel, would they be best off to connect with the local diocese, or for some areas that may be more rural with less resources or less groups in the area, is there like a internet version or a national type of service that for smaller areas to be able to connect with, to then experience group healing via Zoom or something like that?
Yeah, so A little bit of both. So Project Rachel ministry it's a diocesan ministry. So you're always going to be contacting the diocese for the ministry. That said, many you know, as you know, pregnancy centers, right, are sometimes referring. Some offer that's not some offer an abortion healing programs there. But for Project Rachel ministry, some are connected to pregnancy centers where the approach of Project Rachel ministry is, one after somebody is initially through the very intense emotional kind of quote unquote, I hate to call it, it's not a crisis per se, but from the emotional mindset, right, of once this person has gotten through the decision to parent their child or make an adoption plan, right, then they're no longer in that immediate emotional crisis, right? But once she's in a place to really focus on her healing, right, then deal with any prior abortion, then the pregnancy center hopefully has a relationship with the local Project Rachel ministry and can refer somebody who may be looking to begin that healing journey to the diocesan ministry. And then, particularly in the pandemic, everybody went on Zoom, right? And so there were some dioceses that really that were successful with having online Zoom meetings, but really in person is the most ideal way to go, and also the most secure. Zoom bombers. We've heard these stories of people zooming in, and it's really some people really had trouble with the idea of sharing something so personal and so painful online in a Zoom meeting where, anybody, in their mind, anybody could come in at the last minute and, be in this online meeting, right? And they didn't feel secure sharing unless they were in person and they knew the room was private and secured and there weren't others listening in. So it's kind of a mixed experience that people have had with the virtual, the online meetings.
And it sounds like the in-person is probably 10 times better when it's available. But for those that when it's not available, it sounds like, Zoom is, the virtual is reasonable, but obviously only when, the in-person is just not available, perhaps, I would expect.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is there a cost for someone to participate in Project Rachel, or is there like a suggested donation, or how does that side look like?
Yeah, so the ministry is free ultimately. There would be certain costs sometimes, though, particularly on retreats. If some dioceses have moved to day retreats. Some people are finding that it's too difficult for women or men to go away for the whole weekend. They can't get away from their families that long, or it's too expensive. So they're moving to sort of day retreats. And, but every effort is made to keep those costs as minimal as possible. So the diocese really tries to make the ministry, most events are free, but in the case where there might be some costs associated with lodging, particularly with a retreat, that's really, that's one of two examples I'm thinking of where there might be some payment involved. The other is with a therapist. So, therapy, these are professionals, and you're paying for, their professional expertise. The good news is that many dioceses will provide a certain number of sessions for free. And then it's a combination of either a sliding fee scale. And so sometimes, the first 10 to 12 sessions are free. And then from there, the responsibility for the client to pay, might be a certain percentage of the total cost for the therapist. So every effort is really made to make everything either free or minimal cost.
So with all the with pregnancy clinic executive directors or leadership teams listening, whether it's a Catholic pregnancy clinic or an evangelical pregnancy clinic, what would you say to that director, as she is trying to help women, heal from abortion and with referrals? How would you encourage them to consider, promoting or encouraging their, connecting their clients with Project Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I guess a couple of things come to mind that one of the one of the manifestations of abortion trauma, grief, um, pain is an inability to connect with future children. And we also know that many women have, repeat abortions. And so sometimes women will have an abortion and subsequent pregnancies are an attempt to make up for that abortion. And so promiscuous behavior even can sometimes be an effort to dull the pain of that abortion, right? Trying to seek love from uh, places other than God, essentially, or good, healthy relationships. So there's all of that battling, right, in the heart of some of the clients that are coming to a pregnancy center. And so it's important to really minister to that wound, that prior wound that a woman has in her heart, because it's going to, it's for her sake, right? For her sake and her relationship with the Lord, all of her relationships, her relationship with people in her life, her family, but also for her future children if she chooses. And my understanding is that many women choose to parent. Adoption is not, making an adoption plan is not as commonly chosen. For women who don't choose to abort, they're more likely to parent than they are to make an adoption plan. So for the benefit of those future children and that relationship, it's really important for them to eventually get healing for their abortion and for any prior abortions. Sometimes it's multiple abortions before you're seeing her as a client in a pregnancy center.
And when it comes to this, the healing experience, how often, well, what's the journey look like? Is this, I've got a feeling, or my gut saying it's like a journey, throughout the rest of life, more so than it being like a chapter? Or is it sometimes just a chapter and then someone feels completely healed, then maybe it resurfaces and that pain, comes back? What's it look like
No,
in typical journeys?
you're absolutely right, Jacob, that it's most women and men too, also, less men than women, but come forward for healing and help anyway. But yeah, it's typically uh the journey that happens over a long period of time. So I guess I would say there's two aspects to that: is when someone would come forward for healing, and then how long that the healing journey happens. And I would say typically in younger people are more likely to come forward sooner. But there's also there are women who sometimes decades and decades later, there are women now in their 80s who are coming forward for healing, right? And so they've gone, 50, 60 years, and they finally are coming forward for healing. So and then as far as in terms of the length of that abortion healing journey, there's definitely I would say, once you start that intensive process of that healing journey, and you kind of go through some of the steps of forgiving, reconciling with the Lord, forgiving yourself, connecting with the child or children, and entrusting that child to the Lord, forgiving those who may in relationships that may have been involved in the abortion. There are some, typical kind of sometimes naming the child, commending the child to the Lord. Those are typical steps involved in the healing journey. But once someone is in a healthy place and has experienced some healing, there's always more work to be done after the Lord kind of, makes you whole and brings you to a certain place, because there can be certain triggers in your life, right? For example, the death of a parent, right? Where you may be thinking, wow, I haven't told my mother or my father that I've had an abortion. They still don't know. And wow, they might go into heaven and see my child, their grandchild, for the first time. And there's this fear, right? There's this fear. So that can be a trigger for to go back to the ministry and say, hey, I'm experiencing this fear of my mother is now in heaven with my aborted child. I need to process this with people who will understand. I need to talk this through. So it's always going to be events in your life, sounds, sometimes movies, whatever, that might trigger that memory of that painful past. But the good news is that there's always a ministry you can go back to where people will understand and be able to help you through that.
Wow, that's really good. So I think my last question is there also a men's group as well? It wasn't even on my radar until you mentioned that. I mean, and obviously men need healing as well, but I just wasn't even thinking about the men who may attend a Project Rachel group. And I'm assuming you probably have women's groups. And if you do have a men's group, it would be for men only, not co-ed, I would expect.
Yeah, and that's a question that we get a lot, can men and women be in group together? And generally we don't recommend that because sometimes the anger, having men and women process emotions differently. Sometimes women might be less, women and men, vice versa. Like they might be a little less free to, imagine how the men in the room feel if the women are expressing rage at the men that, oh, all of this anger or whatever. They might, it frees them up to process things in a way that is going to be best for them and be able for them to talk openly with the people in their group. So in terms of group events, yes, we do recommend that the sexes are separated. But yes, definitely, Project Rachel Ministry is for men. In some dioceses, they might call it something different, like Project Joseph or Joseph Ministries, because Project Rachel is the name of, is a feminine name, and so. But men generally are, it's hard to get. Men typically come forward for help much less often than women. Number one, their role isn't even recognized. I mean, the law says they have no right in a woman's decision to abort or have an abortion or not, right? And so they feel disempowered. They feel as if they don't have anything to. They don't. I mean, essentially, they don't often, as far as the law is concerned, have a say in the matter. And so, they feel kind of helpless. Sometimes they express an inability to protect the mother and the child. Sometimes they don't even know that they are a father, and then they discover this later. So they're grieving a child they didn't even know existed. So there's about 7 or 8 different ways that the father, can be involved in this situation. And there's the different situations that he can be part of this story. But yes, for sure, when they can reclaim that fatherhood, it's a beautiful thing.
And I guess I might have one more question. This one may be a short one, but do you ever have pregnancy clinic leaders who want to be able to be better equipped to help their clients with good encouragement and direction? Have you ever had pregnancy clinic leadership team type of people who may not need the healing themselves, or maybe they do, but they're looking to equip themselves to help others? Have you ever have those kind of people reach out to Project Rachel?
I do believe that does happen, yeah, at the diocesan level, where they're looking to to be partners. And a lot of times what happens at the local level is people are, the pro-lifers know each other, right? Everybody's that is helping the mothers and the children, right? They know each other and they partner up, and everybody is learning from each other and supporting each other. And I mean, at least on the national level, I mean, I know that a lot of the team at Heartbeat International, a lot of the national, some of the CareNet people, and I'm always learning from them, and I always appreciate, bouncing ideas off of them and learning about what they're doing, and so it's there's never, I haven't participated in anything formally per se, but I mean, in terms of like a partnership, we really view, kind of as I said before, abortion healing journey as something, um, it's its own separate work. That doing that work is one of the things that can cause a woman not to come forward for healing is if she's seeing triggers that may remind her of that painful past. And so in all of our messaging and in all of our outreach, we don't have photos of smiling women with babies and, all of those types of things. Like, we're very careful to recognize where she's at, because she's not going to come forward if she thinks that anything, that we don't get her, right? And so we remove any potential barrier towards her reaching out for help. We really want her to understand, and him, the fathers too, that we're not going to be talking about, the decision has been made. You have made that decision, the painful decision, and now you're ready to be forgiven and really work on the healing part. And so that's really what we focus on, and make sure that painful reminders, are not where we start. We start with her story, and then later on, when she's ready, thinking about that painful past under the guidance of a licensed professional in counseling is often part of that healing.
Wow. Thank you so much for being here, Mary. I think this is a lot of good information, and I'm hoping that the people who listen to this will be able to be better equipped to refer and connect with Project Rachel. And
thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a real pleasure and an honor to be with you and to share.
Our sponsor is Heritage House. Heritage House provides over 1,500 resources and tools for the pro-life movement, from fetal models to yard signs to the precious feet pin. Heritage House is proud of nearly 50 years of standing shoulder to shoulder with pro-life advocates like you. See Heritage House online at www.pro.life. That's pro.life. Supporting our sponsors, like Heritage House, supports the Pro-Life Team podcast. Thank you.
Shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green. He leads me by quiet blue. Yeah, though I walk through darkest alleys, you are me, I need your protection and guidance are comforting me everywhere that I go. You lead me in righteous pathways for your name's sake alone. You've invited me to make your house my home. I will be no